Hello and welcome to Red Cup Conversations. I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and this is a production of Red Apples Media. If you're watching us on television, you're doing so on Lake Sumter TV, Comcast Channel 13, Bright House 498, and CenturyLink Prism Channel 83. So today we're going to be speaking with Roger Beyers and David Rosenbalm from Beyers Funeral Home and Crematory about some of their services and some of the rich legacy that this business has had in our local community. So let's start things off. Roger, thank you for coming on to the show.
Well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
I'm glad you are. I did a little bit of research on Beyers Funeral Home and was pretty surprised just how long you've been here. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and the funeral home itself?
Sure. Perhaps we'll start with the history of when we got started here. My grandfather started in funeral service in Jacksonville in 1918. As an apprentice, got engaged, and at that point, because they required unmarried males to live at the funeral home to be employed there, he had to leave. He relocated to Umatilla, Florida, and went into business with the Beyers Straight Long Hardware and Furniture Store, which coincidentally made caskets in 1920 in Umatilla. So from that extended the questions from families: will you make the caskets? Can you help us with the funeral? And at that point, it became the Beyers Long Furniture, Hardware, Undertaking, and Embalming Services in Umatilla.
Is that right?
So
that's a heck of a business title.
Yeah, it is, and it was not uncommon during that era that hardware furniture stores were sometimes very much involved in the beginnings of that locality's funeral services. Stayed there until 1930, where Granddad moved the business to Leesburg. 1931, we actually bought out L.C. Page at the time, where it was in that location for 1 year, and then relocated to our present location in 1932. So that's the start in the history of Beyers Funeral Home since 1920, which does this year give us 100 years. In the process, of course, my father was involved. Was served in the Navy during World War II. Kind of interrupted that process for a few years, but came back, got involved in the services at Beyers. We ran ambulance at that time too, so
really,
it was again not uncommon for the funeral home to provide ambulance service in addition to funeral services. We would take the red light off the top of the ambulance, and it became the funeral coach. So, fortunately, all of that stopped in 1969. So, kind of an interesting thing.
Not that far back.
Not that far back. I mean, basically, Granddad and Dad made everybody who went out. We had to still put on our suit and tie before we would respond to an ambulance call. So
really, why is that? Just in
protocol.
The event
well, it was just a presentation of how we showed up, trying to stay professional, I suppose. So we had a red light and an oxygen tank in the back, and some of course, education on care of accident victims or whatever to try to get them to the hospitals. But we were not unique to that. That was pretty much the way it was in rural areas all across the country.
Sure,
and,
makes sense.
Yeah.
But still, that's come a long way in the industry. I mean, going from... it just seems like there was a lot of services, but like you said, it was very rural. And I guess, it's just what they did back then.
That's
say
right.
back then, and we're talking back then, right?
Yeah.
1920s and so on.
And of course, then his dad continued through working there and took over from my grandfather. I since took over from my father. And he has since, he passed away 2 years ago. So I represent the third generation. But fortunate to have Roger Jr. At the funeral home, so he represents the fourth generation. I'm the third, and he is hopefully going to continue to carry us into the next century of service.
Wow! So you're basically looking at 4 generations.
We are.
That's incredible. Yeah. You don't hear too much of that anymore because businesses come and go. Different different industries for different reasons, of course.
We are unique, I think, in the fact that not only are we maintaining the name Beyers Funeral Home moving forward for 100 years, it's still family owned with the Beyers. You may still find businesses that carry the legacy name, but they're not part of that legacy and family.
Right, that's true.
So there are very few of us out there, and some of the funeral homes across the state probably still represent that type of generational ownership, unlike other businesses that may sell to someone who's not blood related or doesn't carry the name. So from that standpoint, additionally, we are unique.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So how many locations do you have?
Well, we started with moving it to Leesburg, like I said, in 1931. We went back with our second location to Umatilla in 1975, opening in 76 when we finally opened that. From there, we built a very small branch in Astor, Florida, so it's way up in the north corner of Lake County. And then in 1989, I believe, we opened in Lady Lake. And doubled that location in square footage again in the mid-90s.
Wow.
So we have that. And then 13 years ago, I was in a position to purchase Purcell Funeral Home down in Bushnell. So that gives us our 5 locations that we currently have, and always looking for opportunities for potential expansion as well.
Well, sure. But it still sounds like you're centralized in Central Florida, right? So you have that personal touch,
right.
I guess, the sense of community, I guess.
So 4 of the locations are Lake County, 1 in Sumter County. And additionally, we built our own crematory, the first one in 1989, located a second crematory adjacent to our first one. And to date, we still have the only crematories in Lake or Sumter County.
Really?
Which is somewhat surprising.
So I guess you work hand in hand with other funeral homes?
Not so much. We find that we want to take care of our families, and to take on additional cremation business from other entities in the area, I think would possibly put us in a position where maybe we're not taking care of our families as fast or as much, and we don't. It's a purposeful decision. And so everyone else who offers cremation has to go out of the area to have that provided.
Oh, I got it. Okay. So then, well, it sounds, obviously you've been a part of this community for at least 100 years. It sounds pretty important to you.
It is, and I'm very proud of the fact that we have been in a position to serve families for generations now, 2, 3, even 4 generations that we have served families with their needs when a death occurs.
That's, I didn't even really think about that or consider that. Yeah. Because, well, it almost, it may sound weird coming out of my mouth, but if you get treated well, I guess, where else would you go? Because you're right, 4 generations of families in this local area. Yeah. I don't want to say repeat customers, but basically it seems like you really do perform a very important role in our community.
Well, thank you, Chris. And we think so, too. My grandfather had a very short adage that he would say, take care of the families and the families will take care of you. And it's always about attention to detail. It's asking the questions they don't even think of the questions to be answered that makes things better, special. We only get one shot at doing the funeral right. And unlike so many other businesses where you can go back and redo and have drafts back and forth, we got to get it right the first time. So detail, and make sure we get what the family wants, and ask the questions to prompt them to think in terms of those nature of answers.
Right, and I'm sure we'll get more into this with David in the second segment, but that would be, you actually perform a very important role in that time, don't you? Because, well, a lot of times it's hard to think clearly in times of extreme duress.
It is.
So people go to lawyers when they are out of their element for a number of reasons. I imagine it's probably the same with funeral arrangements as well. Well, I know for a fact because, well, everyone's had loss in their life.
We are the professionals with the answers. We've seen those questions come up before. We have the resources, know where the resources are to send families if we can't personally help them. And that's part of our job. That's part of what we do.
Yeah.
We don't forget our families. You know, a funeral may involve us having very imminent and intimate direct contact with families for maybe 3, 4, 5, maybe a week, and then it kind of tails off. We try to stay in touch with our families, and one of the things that we do that I'm very proud of, we do an evening of remembrance service every December, because holidays are a tough time for families, the first time they're experiencing that, and I've been very, very pleased with the outcome of that. It's where we invite all of our families that we have served, and we do this in multiple locations in December, basically to come together and have them know that we remember and want them as a family to come and gather and remember as well.
Now, you do have, I mean, you're out there clearly within our community, right?
Well, involved in a lot of things.
A lot of things. Can you talk to tell our audience a little bit about some of those little things or a lot of things?
Well, we as the funeral home certainly get involved with sponsoring a widow and widowers program. It is a community-oriented monthly meeting where where you have to have had a spouse die to be invited to come to this. So everyone there has that commonality. Mm-hmm. It's more of a social function than it is anything else. It's designed to help get people out of the house, get them in an environment where they don't feel threatened or have an ulterior agenda to it. Sure. We usually have a program with some form of entertainment sometimes. It's a luncheon typically. I also have another one, to people that don't want to do lunch. We have another person who provides similar things with a breakfast. And again, the whole intent is to help people reconnect with the community.
Okay. Well, we only have a couple of minutes left before we need to take a break. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk about another thing outside, but can you talk to us about the Opry?
Oh, well, 6 years ago, I looked at the opportunity that came my way to purchase the Orange Blossom Opry. Mm-hmm. Has zero anything similarities to do with funeral service. But it is something.
Yes, to be clear. But again, as part of that community, it's more community involvement.
That is very much community involvement. It's a music venue. For those of you that don't know, it's located in Weirsdale. It's the old Weirsdale High School. And
is that right?
We actually functioned the Opry in the gymnasium portion of that. So it's very wide. We seat 550 people. And I'm very pleased to say that we bring in a ton of national talent there throughout the year. I think we have 65 national acts that we bring in. And it's a wonderful venue, safe place as well. It's a lot of fun, smiles. Everybody usually comes happy and leaves happy.
And if someone wanted to get information on this or Beyers Funeral Home and Crematory, where can they get that info?
Both have websites. Beyers Funeral Home is ByersFHC.com, and the Opry is obopry.com, or just type in the Orange Blossom Opry and you'll get the link to the website.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, and we need to take a quick break. When we return, we'll speak with David Rosenbalm. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Red Cup Conversations. Again, I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and this is a production of Red Apples Media. Before the break, we were speaking with Roger Beyers from Beyers Funeral Home and Crematory here in, Central Florida. Now I'd like to continue our conversation with David Rosenbalm, who is going to enlighten us on some of the services that they provide and why it's kind of important. So, David, first, thank you for coming on to the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Kris.
Can you tell our audience a little bit about you and your role over at Beyers Funeral Home?
Sure. I serve as Roger's Director of Operations, which means I oversee operations, day-to-day scheduling, logistics, making sure we're staffed appropriately, making sure the families we serve have the things they need in place. So it's an oversight role. I'm a licensed funeral director and embalmer as well, so I serve in that capacity on a more limited basis. Typically spend most of my time just again overseeing the operations of our locations across the company.
Sure. Now, how long have you been in this industry? I guess, for lack of a better term?
I've been with the Beyers family and Beyers Funeral Home for 20 plus years. It's the only funeral home I've worked in.
Okay. Wow.
I began working for Roger before I enrolled in mortuary college as an unlicensed, what we term staff associate.
Okay.
And graduated from a mortuary science program, became licensed, and have effectively worked up through the company to the position I'm in presently. So,
wow.
It's Roger has been very good to me. The company's been very good, and we're fortunate to be a part of such a company.
Yeah. Clearly, I mean, you're almost a part of the family at this point, I would imagine. Well, 20 years is a long time.
Yeah, Roger might take exception to that, but sure.
Well, of course, but you wouldn't be where you are if he didn't deem you important.
Again, our staff is treated well and very much treated akin to family, so we are fortunate in that regard, certainly.
And speaking of treatment of, like family, what kind of services do you? There's obviously the obvious services, but what does Beyers Funeral Home actually provide?
One of the things I think is most fitting is to say we're a full-service funeral home, and I like to say we're the only full-service funeral home in the area, Lake and Sumter counties. And that alludes a little bit to what Roger touched on with the offering of cremation services and owning and operating the crematory. But it's bigger than that from a philosophical standpoint. We are engaged in every aspect of our business, from the time the phone rings through whatever manner of disposition a family may choose. And it supersedes that in terms of folks that have a want to prearrange, take care of matters, before their time of need.
Sure. Through,
as Roger touched on, some of our aftercare programs with the Life Program and the Widow and Widower support groups. So everything in between, from start to finish, we handle those aspects. We have on-call staff in place 24 hours a day.
Really?
You pick up the phone and you call Beyers Funeral Home. You will not get an answering service. You will not get an automated attendant. During normal business hours, you'll get our funeral home staff. 5 p.m. to 8 a.m., you'll get the funeral director who's on call. So we answer all of our calls every day of the year. So it's really just a different philosophy. We think it's important if families trust us to care for them, that we be available to them, and there are no exceptions to that. And so that's just the philosophy, and that speaks in part to the circle of care that we've trademarked. Again, the phone rings, it's our funeral home staff, whether that's 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. You've had a death, we have staff in place that respond, be that in a private residence, be that in a facility, nursing home, hospice, hospital, and we travel. We respond to deaths as far away as the Panhandle, South Florida. So there are times that we have our staff on the road all over the state of Florida to respond to deaths and the needs that families have.
So you would have a call from the Panhandle? Why? I don't. It just seems like it's more of a localized type of business.
Again, with our communities being so transient anymore, folks, they want to be here. They're going to end up in Leesburg, whether it's in a cemetery, whether it's we handle the cremation.
Sense.
So when the death occurs and they call, we feel a responsibility to be available to them and respond.
Wow.
And again, it's just an important part of the business and the nature of the business, and that kind of throwback family philosophy that we think makes all the difference in our offering versus some other offerings out there. So
right.
Yeah, families have a lot of choices, and we believe this is the way it should be, so this is how we do it.
And they do.
Yeah.
Right? Families have a lot of choices, and we kind of alluded to that in the first segment, talking about just the amount of generations that have gone by, for lack of a better term, return customers, right? The long-term clients, families that still look to you. And
sure.
That I think speaks volumes, because you're not the only home in town. Well,
Yeah.
It came out weird, but you know what I'm saying.
Understood. And yeah, I mean, I've had the privilege to serve families multi-generationally. Multi-generationally. I don't consider my career long in funeral service, 20 years, but again, you see a family multiple times. You take care of, a husband, a father, a child. I mean, my family's no exception to that. My grandparents, aunts, uncles, my father were all taken care of through Beyers Funeral Home. So,
Really?
it's just one of those things that we're kind of an anchor in the community, if you will.
Absolutely.
Time of need, who do we call? We want to be top of mind. Hey, it's Beyers. You have to call Beyers.
Right. The first name that I won't say household name, but the prominent, and
We would
from
like
what
to
I
think it's-
gather,
yeah.
highly respected.
Yes,
And let's face it, because if you weren't, you wouldn't still be around.
I think the 100 years certainly that standard says something about the level of service and the level of care
That's
we
amazing.
provide. Yeah.
It really is. There's not many businesses out there
No.
where you can point and say 100 years, especially localized. Some get
Sure.
super large, Fortune 500, whatever. But no, I think that speaks volumes for, well, you and the organization itself.
Thank you.
So, personal kind of question
Sure.
now. What is it like to work in that environment? Because for me, being an outsider, or I won't say an outsider, but not being, the only time I go or have been to a funeral home, unfortunately, is in time of need.
Yeah.
And it's never really a good moment, What's it like to be in that type of environment 24 hours a day?
Well,
And quite literally, now that I
Yeah.
know, 24 hours a day.
Well, obviously, this is the worst day someone's had when they're coming in your door, picking up the
Absolutely.
phone and calling you. So again, I think you have to be certainly humbled by the trust they place in you. You're grateful to be able to serve and be in a position to serve. Certainly, there is a toll that it takes. There are demands that this job makes of you and your family, certainly. But I would tell you the rewards, it's immeasurable. Before I came over here this morning, I had a lady come in to receive her husband's cremated remains, and just her saying, "I wouldn't go anywhere else. You all have made this so simple for me, so easy for me." I mean, to me, that's what better testament to the job that we do. And again, we know that there isn't any combination of anything that we can do that makes this easy for a family.
Exactly.
If we simplify this process, if we take a lot of the worry out of what they have to do, then we've been successful. We've done our job well. And that's what we
Right.
hang our hats on is that in a family that just says, I don't know what I would do without you all. And again, that's very humbling to have a family tell you that.
Oh,
because,
sure.
Again, it's a profession. We're here because this is the career we chose, but it goes well beyond just that. Those
absolutely.
rewards are, it's remarkable.
Absolutely. And it's got to be.
Yeah.
Again, you hit the nail on the head. It's like that's that family's
Yeah.
time. First of all, it's a confusing period of time. The amount of loss is weighing on everybody that's there.
Yeah.
And yet you still have to make arrangements. You still have to go through the process. You still have to organize your thoughts and paperwork and like I said, that I'm not subject to
Sure.
no loss in my life. It's a very important role, and I can't stress that enough.
And I would submit even beyond that, every family comes to you at a different point of need. So you have to be adaptable to meet that family at their place.
Right.
Because some families come in and they are much more dependent and need much more from us in terms of, emotional support or resources. And some families come in and they have dealt with the death, they have grieved, and this is just part of the final part of the puzzle, if you will, where they're
Right.
saying, we're going to honor mom or dad. We've made our peace with where we're at. And they're just at a very different place than a family that may have had a sudden death or an unexpected death for, a protracted, prolonged
Completely
illness.
different
Yeah.
scenario.
So again, you have to be adaptable. You have to be flexible. You can't just have a cookie cutter and make everybody fit your box. You have
Exactly.
to recognize folks, read their needs, and be able to meet them. And again, we have a magnificent staff that does a really good job of that. As a whole, just kind of picking people up and saying, let us walk you through this.
Okay. Well, what about what recommendations would you have, or do you have, on planning?
Sure.
So that, because I've been in both scenarios where
Yeah.
it was unexpected and had to step in and try to sort this stuff out. Do you have any insight as to,
I don't think,
again, future planning? And I'm,
yeah,
not to be too.
I don't think people understand what a gift it is to plan. We have so many families that sit down with us, and they're lost. We don't know what mom wanted. We don't know what she
Right.
wanted. We don't know what to do. We don't know where anything's at. In the worst case scenarios, you have a family who comes in and sits down and they tell you those things, and then they close the conversation by saying, "We don't have a clue how we're going to pay for this."
Right.
There's a financial burden
There
and
is.
aspect to this, but certainly the emotional toll that you take from your family by planning and arranging these things. Again, it is a gift. There isn't a value you can put on it, whether you do it from just a plan standpoint. We would encourage everyone, document what you want, make sure folks know your wishes, because it doesn't have to be pre-funded, but at least express what it is that you
Right.
want, so that there aren't questions, because folks just they live with a lot of regret, thinking they might have done the wrong thing, and there's just no affirmation if they don't know beyond, we think we did the right thing.
Right. Right. And like I said, I've been in that position,
Sure.
and it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's a tough
what
spot.
would she like to have?
And again, our
I don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And then you have the burden of the family, and
Yeah.
and again, it's a very very traumatizing, and it's just a very sad period
Yeah.
of time for all people involved.
And that's where you have to find those folks at their point of need and say, okay, this is where we are.
Right.
Let's help you.
Okay.
And again, that's what we do. We just kind of pick them up and walk them through it, and figure it out with them and help them make those choices so that they are comfortable, and so that they, again, on the other side, have a sense of peace. And yeah, we did the right thing. We honored mom. We honored dad.
Yes, that's great. But that's why you're there.
Yeah.
So if someone wanted to get information on you or your services, where can they find that information?
Our funeral home is a great resource, ByersFuneralHome.com, spelled out pretty simple. You can call any of our funeral home locations. As we mentioned, we answer those phones 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You'll always get our funeral director on call. I would encourage the main funeral home number, 352-787-4343. That rings to our Leesburg location. And that's, again, for purposes of organizational operation, that's kind of our hub, if you will. A lot happens
Sure.
in our Leesburg location. That's where our crematories are located. So that's always a good place to start. And if we need to get you to one of our other locations, we can certainly direct you appropriately, or have someone, one of the directors from that location, follow up with you and, again, help you from that point of view.
All right. Well, David, thank you so much for
Thank you, Chris.
taking the time out of your day and coming and join us. And that wraps it up for Red Cup Conversations. Again, I've been your host, Kris Poliquin, and we'll see you next time.